going to begin that. So welcome all. It is so great to see you here. My name is Beth Salzberg, and I have the great privilege of coordinating the Percolator Memory Cafe network, which has been running since 2014 as a resource to help make it easier to start and run memory cafes. And the whole purpose of the Percolator is just to be a clearinghouse, a conduit of information, because there are brilliant things going on all around the world in the area of memory cafes and other dementia-friendly programs, and we want to share the wealth. So thank you for participating. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully you can see those slides. Somebody give me a thumbs up that you can see the slides. Excellent, thank you. So today is June 10th. This is our regularly scheduled quarterly meeting. And we have got an action-packed afternoon. So I'm going to move quickly into the meat of it. Little housekeeping. So this meeting is being recorded, and the recording should be available in a week or two, and I will post it along with the slides at the Percolator webpage, which you see there. Just make sure, yes, we are recording. Okay, very good. If you have a webcam and you'd like us to see you, please go ahead and activate your video by clicking on the little video icon at the bottom of your screen. Please keep your audio muted unless you are speaking. We have 300 people scheduled to be on this meeting today, so I'm going to really rely on the chat function for you to send your questions and comments, because it might be difficult to really have people speak up with that number. So at any point, please go ahead and send a message via chat. My wonderful colleague, Ann Muskoff, who runs JFNCS's Parkinson's Family Support Program, is here and helping out. So she's going to be looking at the chats and pulling out comments and questions and kind of aggregating them. And then we'll have a few different times in the meeting where we will focus in on your questions and comments. So if you're just joining us, please take a moment and type your name and your location in the chat box, because it's wonderful to see who's here and from where. So thank you for doing that. So before we get into our discussion about virtual memory cafes, I wanted to join so many voices in the country right now and really just take a moment. You know, many of you are familiar with the quote from Martin Luther King Jr. that we've been hearing and reading quite a bit, that a riot is the language of the unheard. And I don't know that a riot is quite the right term, because the vast majority of the protests and vigils we've been seeing around the country have been quite peaceful. But I think the message that there's something we haven't heard in this country is incredibly important. And I feel that my responsibility here is to bring forward some thinking about what maybe we haven't seen and heard enough in the area of dementia. So I'm just going to mention a few thoughts, a few issues for us to ponder. And the next slide has links, citations for all of these bullet points. So if it's something you want to look at later, you can do that. And I'm sure a lot of you would have a lot of resources to share on these topics as well, and I would welcome them. I did email out the slides to everybody about a half hour ago, so you should have these slides. And again, they will also be available on the Percolator webpage. So we have seen enough research to have learned that African Americans and Latino or Hispanic communities, different studies define that community in different ways. It's not the same, Latino and Hispanic, but there are different studies. We know there's a risk of dementia that's higher relative to white Americans. There's also research showing that communities of color are more likely to be diagnosed late or to receive an incorrect diagnosis. And then, unfortunately, non-white Americans have such low representation in medical research that there's so much we really don't know or don't know for sure. And there's also a lack of representation at the leadership level of a lot of nonprofits and funders and healthcare organizations that are designing and providing services for people with dementia. We know that there are tremendous wealth disparities in this country that break down in race and ethnicity categories. And this makes it hard for people to afford the services that they need. We also know it's incredibly important to have services that are culturally appropriate. Living with dementia and being a care partner of someone with dementia is such a personal journey. There's nothing that could be more personal. And so people need services that feel like home and reflect their values. And these are just a few bullet points. I'm sure there's a lot more that we need to see in here. But I think it's worth all of us just thinking about how do these dynamics play out in our communities and in our cafes. And this is the slide that has some citations if you want to see actual numbers to go with those broad points that I was making. So just one more thought on this topic is we've talked here at the Percolator before, and we will talk again about how do we make our cafes welcoming and accessible to people of various languages and cultures. And so I always come back to what I like to call the Mr. Rogers question. Who are the people in your neighborhood? It's a kind of an evergreen question for cafe coordinators, is to ask, who are the people in our neighborhood and are they coming to my cafe? Some of the kind of levers of inclusion include outreach, but not just sort of sending out the flyers, but really building relationships and working in coalition with different communities so that there are those relationships of trust. What is the imagery we have on our flyers? And then when people do come, are they going to hear music, see activities, or will there be language resources that will make them feel welcome? All of this requires resources, time. It's not easy, and I don't mean to be glib about it, but just wanted to mention something that we will definitely come back to in greater detail at other meetings. And then in addition to making sure all our cafes are as inclusive as possible, we know that there need to be cafes in multiple languages and communities, because if a cafe is going to feel like home, really one size cannot fit all. So just, I want to recognize that the same communities that have faced health disparities are also the hardest hit by COVID-19, and that it's really hard to start or sustain a cafe in a community that is really coping with basic needs. So funders, if there are any funders with us today, you know, I think we really need to try to channel resources to communities that are not yet being served. So let's make this a time of hope. I think this is a very challenging time right now, but it is also a time of hope. And that's what I've been hearing as I read, as I listen, as I attend vigils. You know, seeing and hearing what has been unheard and reflecting on it, this is a lifelong practice. It's not one moment in time, but we have an opening in our country right now where there's a lot more conversation happening. So let's take advantage of it. This is often uncomfortable, and that's okay. I think often when we encounter something that's uncomfortable, we feel like we're doing something wrong. But I think in the area of addressing systemic racism, feeling uncomfortable probably means we're doing something right, because these are really fundamental changes and they're hard. So it's okay if it's uncomfortable. And I just encourage us all, Memory Cafe people, dementia-friendly people, to summon our courage to really sustain our focus on this. And let's do whatever we can to make our country the country that we want to live in. So I wanted to allow a moment for anyone who wants to unmute themselves and just share their thoughts or comments on this topic of inclusion and racial justice, or if you want to type something in the chat box, feel free. I'll just leave a moment for that. Thank you. Thank you for the messages in the chat box. I really appreciate all your thoughts. And this is a conversation that we will continue to have.
You have a question, Beth.
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
Can you talk about your summit and its importance, especially now?
So one of the other programs that I run is the Dementia Friends Public Awareness Program for Massachusetts. And I know that some of you who are here today are also part of a Dementia Friends program in your state. And if I could just ask those who aren't speaking, if you could mute yourself here, I'll just mute everybody. So Anne, you'll need to unmute yourself next time you speak. So this program, I have a grant to work with community-based organizations in 5 different cultural and linguistic communities to really explore with them, how do you talk about dementia in their cultural context? And those communities are African American, Chinese speaking, Portuguese speaking, Russian speaking, Spanish speaking. And in the fall, November 20th, we have been planning to have a summit to talk about what has been learned. And I think we will probably wind up having it virtually. That is to be decided, but it will be live streamed regardless. So if you want to put November 20th, which is a Friday, on your calendar, I will certainly share details with this group as they come. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to a few updates. So just want to make sure everyone's aware that Dave Weiderick runs a National Memory Cafe directory. The URL is Memory Cafe directory. And he created something called Cafe Connect, specifically for virtual cafes. So if you want to list your cafe there, you can go to that website. And if you want to refer your guests there, they can find cafes that they can participate in that are located anywhere. There's a cafe in Brazil that's listed there, as well as many cafes in the US. And then here in Massachusetts, I maintain a directory just for Massachusetts cafes, and I'm in the process of updating that with information about whether cafes are meeting virtually or not. Just a reminder that the Percolator webpage has many resources available for you. So we have the Memory Cafe Toolkit in English and Spanish. Now, this toolkit was designed prior to the pandemic, so it's all about how to start a cafe that meets in a physical location. I'm working on a supplement about starting a virtual cafe, which probably won't be ready for a few months at least, because I think we're really very much in the learning process right now. But even if you're starting a virtual cafe, I think you can get a lot of the basics from the toolkit. There are meeting archives on that webpage, and you can find recordings of past meetings. There's a guest artist and activity facilitator directory for Massachusetts, but many of those folks are now providing virtual programming. So feel free to take a look and see if there's someone you'd like to hire for your cafe. We also have a Google group, so you should have received an invitation to that when you joined the Percolator email list. So if you have specific questions and you'd like to hear from cafe people from anywhere, just email your question to the Google group, and that way you will get a lot of great feedback. If you're not on our mailing list, you can sign up also at that same webpage. And if you don't get my emails, I do get many bounce backs from organizational servers that reject them. And you have to add JFCS Boston to your organizational whitelist for it to be accepted. Feel free to check in with me if you're having problems. Okay, so what I wanted to do now is take you on a fabulous, fun-filled tour of the JF&CS Memory Cafe's journey to the virtual world. So we will spend the next about 20-25 minutes doing this, and then we will open it up and have a period of time for your questions and comments. And then after that, I will be giving the floor to our wonderful panel of teaching artists who will talk about their experience transitioning to the virtual world. So I just wanted to mention, many memory cafes are going virtual. This is from a survey that I'm in the process of doing with Massachusetts cafes. And so far it looks like about a third of cafes are currently meeting virtually, and another 10% are in transition. So there's lots of you out there I could have asked to do this update, and I'm not presenting the JF&CS Memory Cafe as a particular model, but really just, I have the information, so it was like something I could manageably put together for this meeting, but I look forward to hearing from other virtual cafes. And if you're running a virtual cafe and you'd like to present at our September quarterly meeting, please give me a holler. So the JF&CS Memory Cafe started in March of 2014. And one of the special aspects of this cafe is that we set up a partnership with a student group at Brandeis University right at the beginning. So this cafe has always had student volunteers coming every month, which has been a really wonderful aspect. And that's an idea that I borrowed from the Upper Valley Memory Cafe in Dartmouth, New Hampshire. So it was not an original idea, but it's wonderful having a multi-generational cafe. So we meet one Friday morning per month from 10 to noon, and under normal times we meet in Waltham, Massachusetts in Jewish Family and Children's Services conference room, which you see in the photo. We began meeting virtually at the beginning of April 2020. So we've had 3 virtual gatherings. So I'm going to go through what my steps in the transition were, and I've set these slides up in such a way that I'm going to share with you the choices I made, but hopefully you can also see sort of the categories of things that you need to consider if you're making the transition. So the first big choice is, what platform or platforms are you going to use? And so I use both Zoom and telephone. In other words, the programs are designed to be so that people who don't have a computer but just have a telephone are also able to participate. And then if you're using some kind of online platform, you have to make choices about which security options to use. And these, of course, are going to look a little different depending on the platform that you use. So those of you who are Zoom users, maybe my terminology will sound familiar. It may not sound as much for other platforms, but these concepts are pretty common to different online platforms. So I decided that I did not want to require pre-registration on Zoom for my Memory Cafe. So just to give you context, I required pre-registration on Zoom for this meeting. So if you're here right now, you clicked on a link and you filled out a little form, and then you received a unique Zoom link. So you pre-registered, and I decided that that was a bridge too far for the Memory Cafe, that it would confuse people, and it would also mean I couldn't send out an email to everybody with one link because each person gets their own. And I just feel like that's so much part of how I communicate with this group that I needed to be able to do that. So instead, what I do is I share a Zoom link and a telephone number with my whole group, but I'm careful about how far that information travels. So I send out a message at the beginning of every month and say, this is what's coming up for the next month, save the date. And I will be sending you the Zoom link a week ahead of time. So a week ahead of time, I send another message with that link. And I have a list of providers that I outreach to every month. And what I do is I ask them to have people email or call me if they want to join our mailing list, if they've never come to our cafe and they want to try it. And then I communicate with those folks individually. So I'm never posting the Zoom link on social media. I'm not sending it out in mass emails far in advance where it would be likely to travel and potentially open the door to Zoom bombing, as they call it, people joining the meeting who were not intended to be there. I also send out privacy information about Zoom to guests, and a few of you had emailed me to ask for this information. I'm going to show it to you. Of course, you can't read this. This is a messy slide with lots of information, but you should have received the slides from me, so you can go back and see this in detail. But I just copied and pasted in my message so you can see it. Basically, it's saying, you know, I'm going to do everything I can to protect your privacy. When I do record the cafe, I only record the sort of facilitated activity. And if any of the guests show up in that video, I check with them before I share it. And I'm working hard to not even have them show up in the video, which saves a lot of difficulty later on. And then what I'm asking of them is that they find a private location to participate from, but that I cannot guarantee that they won't, you know, be in their home and other people may walk by behind them and see who's on the screen. That's not something that I can guarantee. So those are the key points in this information. So what are some of the steps that we went through in this transition from an in-person cafe to a virtual cafe? So for guests, I needed to determine whether most of our guests would be able to use Zoom or telephone. Early on, I made a round of phone calls to check in and see how people were doing. And I checked in with them about their thoughts about taking part in a virtual cafe. So I did get some feedback that way. I felt confident that between Zoom and telephone, we would reach a good number of participants. I needed to plan to mail necessary materials in advance to guests who only use the phone. And of course, this is only possible for our regulars. If someone decides 2 days in advance that they want to take part for the first time and they only have telephone, I'm not going to be able to get those materials to them. That hasn't been a problem, but it's something I've worried about. We had to create a fillable registration form for new guests so that I'm able to email them a form and they can fill it out to register, whereas that used to all be done on paper at the cafe. And I needed to establish a process for new referrals, which is what I already described, that I ask for people to RSVP to me, either by email or telephone, and then I'll send out that registration form and the Zoom call-in information. And as I had mentioned, it's risky to share a Zoom link on social media, so I avoid doing that. So I also try to help people who are having trouble using Zoom but might want to. So I really like this YouTube video that Marcia Chadley in Denver created, joining a Zoom call for the first time. I've shared that with a lot of you. You can look it up. There are plenty of other really good video tutorials, but I like including a link to a video tutorial in my message out to cafe guests, because some of them just need that little bit of extra help to understand how to join the Zoom meeting. And then I'm very pleased that 4 of our Brandeis volunteers have now been trained as tech volunteers. So they have come forward to say that they would be willing to spend time on the telephone or FaceTime, what have you, with our cafe guests who need a little extra help to figure out either how to use Zoom or how to use some other platform that they're working with, let's say, to communicate with their family. So I'm hoping that little by little, we're starting to be able to give a boost to people who are just really intimidated or overwhelmed by the technology. There are also people who don't have the hardware or don't have internet. And there are services in our area that are trying to help people with that. So it's a little bit of a, you know, one at a time, trying to support people depending on what it is they need. And I view it as a really valuable use of our time to do that, because nowadays, and for how long we don't know, the online world is the gateway to so much that's important, including telemedicine. So if you're able to put some time into helping your cafe guests make that transition, you're really doing something very important. So let's talk a little bit about activities and how that aspect of the transition has gone. So I've needed to talk with guest facilitators who were already scheduled to determine their comfort with facilitating a program virtually. And not everybody has felt ready or comfortable. So I've made a few changes in who has been a guest facilitator. And I've also needed to talk with them about the fee. In some cases, it's just the same as it was. In other cases, there's one person who recently led an activity for us who travels a long distance, and so he reduced his fee because he didn't have to travel. But that's certainly a conversation that has to happen if you use guest facilitators. Not every cafe does, which is totally fine, but if you do, you're going to want to really check in with people, make sure they have a stable internet connection, any other equipment they need, really kind of walk through what their program is with them and troubleshoot how it would work in a virtual context. I've really tried to choose activities that would work by telephone also, although I do think a lot of things can work by telephone with planning, and I'm going to walk you through what we've done for the last 3 months in a minute. So when you are using a platform like Zoom, everyone's audio travels through their own broadband and at different speeds. So if a group is singing and everyone is unmuted, you're really going to have kind of a cacophony. So what we've been doing is usually muting everyone except the song leader when we are singing together. And it has become clear that sound quality can be improved greatly by a professional microphone and other sound equipment. So, you know, Zoom is not optimized for music, and without some extra equipment and know-how, music really does not sound very good on Zoom, but that can be remedied. So here's what we've done. In April, my wonderful colleague Margie Sokol led Songs of Spirit and Resilience. So we had a sing-along with the lyrics on slides, and you can kind of see Margie's thumbnail video here. One interesting request that came out was that people wanted to be able to see her guitar, and the way her setup was and her camera, that wasn't really possible. But I think for some of our guests with dementia, it felt a little disembodied for them to hear a guitar sound without being able to see it. So that was an interesting takeaway. And we did record this session. It's on the JF&CS website if you want to watch it or share it. And then in May, we had Jane Blair, who has a wonderful program called Art Matters, where she provides imagery and education about a particular artist or art movement. So we learned about the art of Marc Chagall. So this is something that you would feel wouldn't work very well by telephone, but I was able to send out a copy of her slides printed out to the handful of our folks who only used a telephone, and they just went through them. And they told me that it was great. It really did work for them. So that was a very visual one. And then most recently, we had Doug Schmaltz, who was also singing, and you can see his guitar. So see, we've learned. You can see his guitar, and he was using a professional microphone and a mixer. And it sounded amazing. It really sounded good. And we'll be posting that recording on our website in about a week. So how to facilitate a virtual cafe? So there definitely are ways that it's different than in person. Zoom offers a waiting room, and I don't use that. I just let people join early. So I sign on at least 15 minutes early and people start to arrive. And then at the beginning of the cafe, I always go over the core Zoom controls, and I actually included my slides that I show at my Memory Cafe in this slide deck. So I'm going to walk through those with you in a minute, just so you can see what it is that I go over with our guests. And I ask everyone to type their name in the chat box, just like I did with our group today. And this is really helpful for attendance. You may or may not take attendance, but I do, and it's something that I need to track as best I can. And if you've used Zoom or other teleconferencing platforms, I know you've had this experience where someone shows up just as a black box and a phone number, or maybe they show up as Joe's iPad or something like that, or Mickey Mouse, you know, who knows? The screen name could be anything. So you don't necessarily know who that is. So it's really great if people can type their name in, and that has a double benefit. It helps them really see how you send a chat message, and that way they're going to be able to communicate with you throughout the cafe if they need to. I try to welcome and engage with our guests by name as much as possible. Just one of those little pieces to try to, you know, break through the wall of the computer and have people feel more that they're in a human environment and that their presence matters. And I really try to mute everyone at certain times because often there's a lot of background noise, especially because some of our guests don't realize that they can be heard. So I want to minimize that background noise because that can be very distracting and stressful for anyone, but especially guests with hearing loss or living with dementia. However, I also make a point of unmuting everyone periodically and having an opportunity for people to speak to each other and interact. And then I also will read the chat messages aloud, just to let people know, yes, I hear you, you are communicating, and to have that sense of back and forth. I do like to record the more formal part, the activity part of the cafe when possible. It depends on the guest artist. So that is also a conversation to have with your guest facilitator if you have a guest facilitator, because they may or may not be comfortable with that. And they certainly have the right to say, you know, no, this is my product, this is what I get paid for. And so if you record it and share it, it's like giving away what I do for free. So I really respect that, and it's important to make sure that's okay. If it is okay, it can be nice to record it because then people can watch it again, they can revisit it. At the last Percolator meeting on April 28th, one of the virtual cafes from around the country had shared an anecdote that they got a message from one of their cafe guests that a couple had watched their recording something like 24 times already. So it can be a wonderful thing to have that recording. But what you don't want is to have everybody's image and name showing, because then you have to be very concerned about privacy. So in Zoom, you can do something called pinning or spotlighting the speaker's video, depending how you're recording it. And you can look those functions up on the Zoom website and learn more. And then there are other ways to do that on different platforms, but you just want to know in advance how you can make it so that only your facilitator's video is getting recorded. And you can, you know, sometimes you can do editing after the fact if you or a colleague has that software, but it's definitely easier to try to record it in the beginning in a way that it's just ready to go. So I have a little bit more to share with you about my virtual cafe, and then we'll have a chance to talk about your questions and comments. But I wanted to walk you through what the agenda looks like for my virtual cafe. So I sign on by 9:45 in the morning, and I ask my guest facilitator to sign on too, and I make them a co-host in Zoom so that they have the same controls that I do. They can unmute themselves even when I've muted everybody, etc. And that there usually are a few people who start to arrive then. And so we just chat. It's actually really nice. And then at 10, I welcome everyone and start the cafe. And I do some of the things that I always did. Like I always would let folks know at the beginning that they should just be comfortable. If they need to get up at any point to stretch or get another cup of coffee, use the restroom, they should just do it. There's a Spanish phrase that I always say when my cafe met in person, which is es tu casa, which means this is your house. So I still say that every time. And then we always laugh a little bit because everybody is in their house. So it really, really is their house. But I try to kind of keep some of those little rituals consistent because I think it means something to the people who have been regulars at our cafe. And then I go over the Zoom controls, which I'm going to show you in a minute. I ask participants to type their name in the chat box. And then we have about an hour where the guest facilitator leads an interactive program. And when I started the virtual version of our cafe, I thought that would be it. I thought, you know, an hour and a half is long enough for people to sit in front of a computer. We should just plan to make the cafe an hour and a half instead of 2 hours. But what I found is people didn't want to leave. And so we've just started something new, which is where our Brandeis students are picking out a question from the Time Slips website, where they have a resource called Beautiful Questions. This is a wonderful, glorious thing. I'm such a huge fan of Time Slips. If you're not familiar with it, timeslips.org, and then go to the Creativity Center and look at Beautiful Questions. So they pick a question and then they facilitate about a half hour of discussion with whoever wants to stay. And if people need to leave, that's fine. So the question that they asked at our cafe this past Friday was, you know, what's something you've always been curious about? I'm not saying it quite right. It was really carefully worded, but we wound up having an amazing discussion about racial justice and why is it that people aren't always kind to one another. It was very profound. So people absolutely wanted to stay for the 2 hours. So that's our new tradition now. So I'm going to just walk you through the slides that I show at my cafe at the beginning to help people know how to use Zoom. So we do this quick review, and the goal is we want to make sure they can hear and see us and that we can hear and see them. So I show them how to turn off and on their video. And I show them how to unmute and mute. We haven't really had this problem, but I have a little piece down there about what happens if people join audio both on their computer and their phone and we get an echo. And it's interesting, that was happening a lot in March. It hardly ever happens now. So I feel like as a society, we are starting to learn how to use Zoom and other platforms, which is awesome. And then I show them how to use chat. You know, unfortunately, all these, the interface, it's really tiny. I mean, it's really developed for people with good eyesight, you know, and sort of maybe a little more comfort with computer terminology than a lot of guests who come to a memory cafe. So it's nice to just kind of really show them, this is what the chat box looks like. You click on this little icon up here and you're going to get this box, and down here is where you type your message. So I ask them to put their name in now and that they can send a message at any point. And then lastly, I show them that they have control over what their screen looks like, because very often we do have slides, and sometimes the slides are going to be blocked by the thumbnail videos. So I show them how they can use their cursor to move them over, or they can choose, there's a place that says view options and they can choose side by side. So we do that. So outreach and attendance. So, you know, I really had no idea what was going to happen when we started our cafe virtually. And what I've found is that overall, net, our attendance is about the same as before. Unfortunately, some of our regulars opted out. They just felt like this was not going to work for them, either because the person living with dementia is not enjoying a video interface, or they just felt like trying to make the leap to join a Zoom gathering or to use the telephone was going to be too hard. And I am hoping that we're going to bring some of those folks back in over time, but some have opted out. And I just want to take a moment here and say one thing, which is there are several individuals with very advanced dementia, several individuals with advanced FTD, frontotemporal degeneration, who have been taking part in our virtual cafe and are totally enjoying it and doing fine. One of them thinks it's hilarious. He's always laughing just at this screen and what's going on, but he finds it quite amusing. And I've heard feedback from several care partners that their partner stayed fully engaged the whole time. So I think it's very individual. I don't think that just because someone has advanced dementia or dementia due to a particular condition, they can't enjoy a virtual cafe. I think it's very individual. So we have lost some regulars, at least for now. And then several new people have joined. So I continue to reach out to providers once a month, and I have listed my cafe on the virtual cafe directory that Dave runs. And I've gotten enough new people that we're about at the same attendance level. And I've been curious to see, would people join from far away, or is it pretty much still going to be people near us? And most of the new participants have been in our same geographic area, but recently one new family from Georgia found us on the virtual cafe directory and joined in, which is fun. So that's how it's been. I think that lots of memory cafes are doing lots of things to stay connected, whether or not they're operating virtually. And I just wanted to mention a few of the things that I've been doing. So I did do a round of phone calls at the beginning, and our student volunteers offered to be matched as telephone friends with our cafe guests, and only one person opted into that. I think, you know, it's interesting. I think it just maybe felt awkward or unnecessary at that time. But over time, maybe there will be more takers. One thing that's been really nice is that volunteers have been making handmade cards and sending them to me, and then I send them out with our monthly mailing, and people just love them. And here on the left part of the screen, you see a group of Brandeis students who have been having card making parties together on Zoom. So it's a wonderful way for our volunteers to stay connected and engaged and have something really meaningful that they can do. Over on the right, you see just some of the beautiful cards that I've received and been able to send out. And as I had mentioned before, we're now offering tech assistance by a select group of volunteers who are willing to have phone conversations or FaceTime or what have you to help people learn how to use Zoom or some other application. So feedback from guests. What I am hearing so far is that there is still a strong sense of community and connection during the cafe, even though it's virtual. And it's very palpable to me. During those 2 hours, you know, I'm looking at people's faces a lot of the time and they're just beaming. They're happy to be there. So even though it's not the way we would rather be together, it is meaningful and it does work. Many guests stay on for the full 2 hours. And then one really interesting thing is that some people are attending who just never really could get there in person. For example, there's a couple where one member of the couple is on hospice right now and is pretty much confined to bed, and they're able to participate. So this is a time where access is being limited in lots of ways, and it's also a time where access is being opened up in certain ways. Because for a lot of people living with dementia, having to get dressed at a certain time, having to get someplace, having to find transportation, these can all be really significant barriers. And those barriers are actually gone right now. As I had mentioned, several guests who have advanced dementia are really enjoying it and able to stay engaged. And the recorded portions have been appreciated by some of our guests who either find it hard to attend live or they want to revisit the experience. So a few comments about what it's been like for me to run the virtual cafe. It is turning out to be less expensive because there's no food, paper goods, other materials. I am notorious for buying a lot of food for every cafe, and I know can attest to that because there's always goodies in our lunchroom after the Memory Cafe when I have leftovers. I can't help it. It's my heritage. I need to feed people. I get a lot of food. So that's an expense we don't have right now. I have often been fortunate to find businesses to sponsor particular cafe sessions. And I haven't tried to do that for a virtual cafe yet. That just has been one thing I haven't had time to think about. I don't know whether it would be harder to get sponsors for virtual sessions or not. I assume it's harder in general to get sponsorships right now because of the financial hardships brought on by the coronavirus. It does require a little more planning time in that I am preparing my slide deck each month, although there are very minor tweaks that I'm making to it now that I've pretty much got it together. And I do need to spend a little more time with the guest facilitator in advance to just make sure our plans are in place. But there's much less setup and breakdown time. So I think once the new systems are really in place, it's going to take me about 2 less hours per month because it usually takes me a full hour to set up and a full hour to break down. And then here's the big looming decision. When eventually we can be back together in person in our cafe room, will we keep a Zoom option? I would really like to, and I'm not sure yet exactly how that's going to work. But I feel that for people who find it easier to attend that way, I would really like to make that possible. So for me, that's a big question mark, and I hope it's an area that we can learn together because I think a lot of cafes are going to be confronting that same challenge. And one thing I've said when I've been corresponding with folks who are starting a virtual cafe from scratch is that it's important for you to decide, are you going to have a physical location planned? And if so, you may want to really let people know what your plan is, because if you're going to only be meeting physically one day and all the people who only ever have known you as a virtual cafe, are they going to still be able to participate? So you wouldn't want to sort of leave them hanging. So with that, I would love to stop talking and see what some of your questions and thoughts are. Anne, have you been able to spot some questions?
Yeah, and actually you just answered one of them about, rejoining after COVID. There were some very pragmatic, practical sorts of questions like, could you share your registration form? Do you ask for a full name for attendance? And how much do facilitators charge?
So let's see. So happy to share my registration form. There is a version of it in the Memory Cafe toolkit if you've downloaded that. And then the one we use now, it's simply a fillable electronic version of the same paper form. Sorry, what was the next question, Anne? Whoop, you're muted.
You ask for the full name of the attendees?
In the registration form I do, but if you mean their screen name, so what other people can see during the cafe, it is up to them. I think that for a lot of our attendees, the process of renaming themselves on the screen is a little bit complicated. And for those of you who don't use Zoom, what I mean is that on Zoom, there are little thumbnail videos and there's a name attached to each one. The person can hover their cursor over it and change the name that shows. So if their last name shows and they would rather not, they could erase it or something else. And I haven't been fine-tuning that. All I have been doing is sending out that disclaimer in advance, which says your name and your image and your voice are going to be shared during our cafe meeting. The other thing I do try to do is I try to figure out who it is if somebody's calling in, and then I change that on screen so that their phone number isn't showing. I don't like the idea of people's phone numbers showing, and also I'd like to have a name associated with that box so that people can interact better. But I have not been worrying about last names, even though when we meet physically, the name tags are first name only. So that's a good point. That's one way that the virtual cafe has revealed people's identity a bit more. And again, what I'm doing is not the final word on this. So I'm happy to hear what others think about that.
There's another great question given hearing loss in this population, which is, could you talk about caption access via caption phone and or supplementing computer audio using both at the same time?
That's a great question. So if you're using Zoom, people who have a captioned phone can call in to the Zoom meeting using that phone, and the captions will appear on it so that the meeting will essentially be captioned for them via their telephone. You can also hire someone, a CART provider, C-A-R-T, it's an acronym. It's someone who does live transcription, and they can transcribe into Zoom so that your captions appear on the screen. That's an expense. It's usually charged by hour, and in your town, you could contact, or your state, you might contact your state, as probably most states have an association for the deaf or hard of hearing, and they can probably refer you to CART providers, or they may even have a resource that you could use at a discount or for free. Zoom does not offer automatic transcription. Some other applications do. I believe Google Hangouts does. The challenge with something like that is honestly, a lot of times the automated transcription is really bad, like laughably bad. So you may say cafe and what you see on the screen may be kaleidoscope. That's a bad example, but people aren't necessarily going to get the right words. Did I answer the question? Was there a second part to that, Anne?
I think it's about the call-in option for sound, and you might want to talk about how to leave computer audio to keep the echo from happening.
Yeah, so a big challenge is that when someone joins a Zoom meeting, the screen is going to ask them, do you want to join using your computer audio? And sometimes people say yes, and they will also call in by telephone. And if they have two devices kind of physically near each other, there's going to be a terrible echoing sound. I bet most of us have been on at least one meeting where we hear that horrible sound. And the only way to stop that is to either exit one of those devices, or if they want to use their telephone for audio, they can go down to their Zoom controls, and I'm going to do it right now to show you. There's a little caret next to the microphone, which gives you more options for audio, and you can click on leave computer audio. And then you're basically closing out your computer audio, and hopefully that takes care of it.
Unfortunately, we couldn't see that on your screen share.
Oh, you couldn't? Okay. If you hover your cursor down at the bottom, there's a little kind of divot between your mute button and your video camera, and you'll see the options there.
Another couple of people were asking just about how to get feedback, surveys and whatnot.
So I do an annual survey of my cafe, and I just am sending it out this month. So I added in a section to get feedback on what the virtual cafe has been like and connecting to that. There are a lot of different ways that people do evaluation and get feedback. We had a Percolator meeting on that a couple of years ago, and if you email me, I'm happy to send you the slides from that, because there were great ideas, and many of them could work in a virtual setting. But there are many cafes that allow time during the cafe itself to have a little processing and feedback. What was that like, etc. And that's wonderful, actually, because it's you're more likely to get information that way. You know, there's always trade-offs between a more formal survey where you're wording your questions in a specific way and you get more quantitative data, as opposed to a more open-ended qualitative conversation. In an ideal world, people would do both. You know, you would have some opportunities to just discuss, and also something that you send out at a specific time to get more formal comments.
I don't know how much time we have.
Maybe one more question, and then we'll move on to our teaching artists, and then we'll have
very
time.
quick practical one is, do you have guests use the speaker or gallery view?
It's really, so on Zoom, you can make a decision how you want to view the thumbnail videos. If you choose the speaker option, you get a big box for the person who's talking. If you use gallery view, you get little equal size boxes for everybody. This is something I've decided so far I have just not brought up during the cafe, because I've thought a lot about what are the Zoom controls that they most need to know about. And I really want people to know whether or not we can see them and whether or not we can hear them. And I'll tell you, during the first virtual cafe, there was a person who joined and could not hear us. So this person needed to adjust the volume of their computer, but we could hear them. And this person didn't realize it and was frustrated and swearing up a blue streak. So, you know, that experience really sensitized me that I want to make sure people know and can control whether we see them and whether we hear them. And I'm not as worried about whether they get the gallery view or the speaker view. I feel like that's sort of a icing on the cake option. But if you want to talk with people about it, you can just show them the two options and tell them it's their choice. You know, I think people who participate in the cafe are agreeing that for that period of time, their voice, their image will be available to other participants. And that's actually no different than if they were coming in person, because you'd all be in the room together, everyone would see and hear each other. So that's how I've handled it. So I really want to thank you, Anne. That is incredibly helpful, the way you're curating these comments and questions. And what I would love to do now is change gears and turn it over to the panel of teaching artists who are with us here today. And they're going to do something very similar to what I just did. They're going to each take up to 10 minutes and walk through what their transition has been in their creative modality. And then we'll pause at the end of that and we'll have some time for discussion. Before I introduce them, we've been sitting here for an hour. So if you want to, I just want to welcome you to stand up, hold your hands up high, touch your toes, wiggle around, get the blood moving. I don't want anybody passing out on my watch, so. And feel free to keep stretching. Don't feel like you need to stand on ceremony here. So I'm really excited and grateful that we have with us today Gary Glazner, who's the founder and executive director of the Alzheimer's Poetry Project, Art Sullivan, who is a dance instructor and leads the Parkinson's dance program where I work and Ann works at JFNCS in Waltham, Erica Curcio, who is a registered if folks don't mind muting themselves, thanks. Erica is a registered art therapist and licensed mental health counselor. And we have Ishmael Butera and Deborah Karpel, who are both musicians and song leaders in New York City. And we have Monique Morimoto and Stephen Whitney, who are drumming instructors and run Soulworks Rhythm. So this is going to be fun. And first, I'm going to give the floor to Gary. You there, Gary? If you can unmute yourself.
Yes, I am. Hi.
Hi, Gary.
Can you hear me okay? Give me thumbs up if you can hear me.
Yeah, maybe you could be a little louder if you want to adjust your volume just a tad.
I am going to adjust my volume by coming a little closer and talking louder. How's that?
That is a great way to adjust your volume.
Well,
So Gary,
Beth, I feel like you invited me here so that I could learn from you, because that was an amazing just learning experience of all of the detail you thought through and the amazing things you're doing. So I just want to take a minute to acknowledge that. And again, let's just, everybody out there, if you learned as much as I did, give Beth thumbs up, because that was really, really great.
thank
So
you,
many
Gary.
ideas. Oh, my pleasure.
And Gary was one of the first people that I called when I was looking to start a memory cafe. So you've been one of my mentors from the start. So coming right back at you.
Well, and I noticed Susan McFadden was among the people that have signed in, and she was there that very first day.
Yep.
What was that, like about 150 years ago?
Yeah, Gary came from New York and was part of a symposium that we had about the concept of dementia-friendly communities, new concept, and facilitated at our cafe. Yeah, I think it was about 151 years ago.
Yeah.
But in any case, I want to give you the opportunity here to share with us what you do.
Well, I think the one thing that you didn't mention is the thing that I have learned is that the more hats you wear during the video, the better the presentation. So I'm just going to mix up my hats here a little bit. Just a couple different hats. We'll get some different hats. So anyway, yes, hi everyone. It's so exciting and what an honor to be here with you. Let me just share briefly, just for a minute, how I got started doing this work. Now, this was way back in 1997, and I got hired to go to an adult day program in Novato, California, a little north of San Francisco. No instruction, just use poetry. And I hit on the idea of using classic poems that the group, the people might have learned as kids. And my moment of inspiration, the story I love to share with people, is there was a guy in the group and his head was down. He wasn't participating at all, seemingly unaware of his surroundings. And I said the Longfellow poem, I shot an arrow into the air and his eyes popped open. He said, it fell to earth, I knew not where. And that was a really heartfelt moment for me to see how useful poetry could be with this community. So that leads us to Beth asking, what does she want? What's going on, Beth? I thought we were just going to catch up, but you actually want to talk about stuff. So let's talk about this. Beth has put up a beautiful slide. Now, this was one of the last events I did before the pause or the quarantine. This was at a nunnery in Sinissawa, Wisconsin. And they have a memory cafe there, and they invited me to be their guest. And I went and visited with them. And what you're going to hear is the Emily Dickinson poem, Hope is a Thing with Feathers. And,
so Gary, I'm going to stop sharing and you're going to share. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up in just a second. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So what you're going to hear is their challenge was I said the words and then they had to sing them back, and we were using a technique called call and response. So I'm going to do a quick screen share here, and we're going to hear a 1 minute long video. You're going to see images of Sinissawa, of the chapel, and also a little bit from Brooklyn, New York. So let's see if we can. And this is of course one of those special functions. We can talk more, but screen sharing allows me host disabled attendee screen sharing. So I don't know if this may not, let's see if this, yeah.
Gary, I just made you a co-host. Sorry about that. You should be all set now.
Okay, there we go. That's there, it's working now. Now let's just see how quickly, now you should see my Zoom thing. Let's get rid of that. Now do you see a sort of sunrise? You can see that? Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, here we go. So this is a 1 minute video. Hope is a Thing with Feathers. You're gonna hear the nuns of Sinissawa improvise the performance.
Hope is a thing with feathers.
Hope is a thing with feathers. Hope is a thing with feathers.
That perches in the soul.
That
and sings the tune
and sings the tune, and sings the tune,
without the words
without the words, without the words,
and never stops.
and never stops at all, and never stops at all.
At all, at all, at
So I love that. Was such a great experience, and I just wanted to share that with the group, and also to just draw attention to this idea of screen sharing, so that your facilitators and guests can share videos and things that might be more difficult to do in a live setting. So as Beth said, so much is open. It's things have closed down, but it also has opened up. So that's a very cool part of this.
Thank you, Gary.
Go ahead, Beth.
So I'll just go through the slides. Just tell me when to go to the next one.
Okay, you're going to do it that way, huh?
Yeah, I guess.
So just a little bit of my experience. I talked about starting this work in Northern California in 1997. My history of doing virtual things also goes back to that year with the AOL chat room. Anybody remember Jenny? I can see my friend Jenny. Jenny, have you ever been in an AOL chat room? Give me thumbs up if that's your experience too. No, okay. So I've been doing online stuff for a long time, and so I'm quite comfortable doing it. And as Beth said, it does open things up in a way, which is very interesting. Let's forward. Okay, so just before we go on, so I use Zoom. I use Zoom for poetry sessions, and also our we call it Memory Arts Cafe, because we always have a guest artist. And I've been using Facebook Live as well. And I've created a call-in show using the phone. So we'll talk more about those. Let's go ahead and advance that slide. So I've now transitioned to doing all of my workshops online, which is good. It took a little while to get them going, but now I'm doing about 6 sessions a week with different adult day programs, and also with preschool. I do a lot of work with preschoolers as well. And we do our monthly Memory Arts Cafe, and I do it in partnership with New York Memory Center. So they do a lot of the work that Beth does. She does both hats of organizing the whole thing. I'll echo her thing of doing the tech rehearsal if possible, but Beth, I am going to use some of your slides. I love that you did the instruction of how to use Zoom in the beginning of the programs. I love that. I'm going to definitely, is that okay if that's what this is for, right? To teach us new stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah, and feel free to improve upon them. So I'm happy to share those slides with anybody who wants them.
Yeah, I really love that.
Make it a small enough slide deck that I can just email them out to the list.
There you go. That would be really cool. Again, as Beth said, I'm sort of just echoing everything you said. It was so complete of your talk. But we find that most times it's care partners together. Often they'll get the Zoom started, and this is referring more to the poetry party workshops than our Memory Arts Cafe. But they'll often get the Zoom going, and I just want to share this story from this morning. I love to share stuff that just happened. You know what I mean? That I'm bursting. I want to tell you guys. So this morning I was doing a session with New York Memory Center, my home base here in Brooklyn, adult day program. And I know that one of the women, Ola, she's, really quite good at poems. But today I realized for the first time, she has memorized I Carry Your Heart by E.E. Cummings. Over the last couple of years of performing that on a regular basis with the group, Ola has now memorized it. I started saying it and she took over. And it was so remarkable. And I'll just share with you a joke that she's created. So the line, if you don't know the poem, it's a beautiful poem. It says, I carry your heart in my heart. I'm never without it. Anywhere I go, you go. And Ola has taken that line and turned it into a joke. She says now, anywhere I go, you go, Hugo. And so not only is she in, fairly late stage dementia, but she's showing evidence of lifelong learning, of continuing to be able to memorize poems that are new to her, and to take those poems and to be spontaneous and create jokes. Now the whole group knows that joke, and we all love saying it. That is a little off topic, but I had to share that with you. That just was this morning. I realized that she's got it memorized. The other thing that happened today, which we've got one of our teaching artists is on, and I believe it's her mom, has a great singing voice, and Deborah's going to sing a little bit too. But her mom was singing Joyce Kilmer's Trees. I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree. Now, the most famous version of that is by Alfalfa from Little Rascals. But she was singing a great version of it. It was so beautiful. I know this is off topic, but I just wanted to share a little bit of the stuff that's going on because frankly, Beth has covered all of this stuff. There's no reason for me to go over it.
No, Gary. There's lots of stuff I haven't covered here, so I'm going to just advance your slides.
Well, you tell me something you haven't covered, and you can knock me over with a feather. Hope is a thing with feathers. That's what I say. What did you not cover that you want to talk about?
So you do call and response with poetry, and I mentioned with singing that the audio delay is an issue. So how does that call and response play out on Zoom for you?
I preface it by saying, so first of all, sometimes we mute everyone except for one person, and we just do that. Especially with the preschool kids, that works great to just do one-on-one, and everybody else can say it at home, but the one person's leading. So we do that. Sometimes we just want to hear the cacophony. And it just, I say it's going to sound crazy, but we'll get through it and it will be fun. And people laugh. As you said, your one guy really he thinks it's funny. If you don't look at this Zoom thing and think this is funny, I mean, my God, look at us all here in our little boxes. One thing we do in the boxes, I didn't put this down, but if you've got it, the grid where you can see it kind of like Brady Bunch grid, I call it, you can go to the next person next to you and slap hands and stuff, which is really fun to do. But the call and response, should we do just a tiny bit of it so that we can show the group? They heard it with the Sinisawa nuns, but let's do a little bit, Beth. You and I'll do it. We'll do a little bit of I Carry Your Heart by E. Cummings. And if you're at home, you're muted, you can say it along. Beth will be your voice and you can say it along with her. Let's give it a little try, just shortly, just a minute or so. You ready, Beth?
I'm ready.
All right, I'll say it, then you say it. That way we can perform the poem together. Here we go. I fear no fate.
I fear no fate.
For beautiful.
For beautiful.
You are my fate.
You are my fate.
I want no world.
I want no world.
For lovely.
For lovely.
You are my world.
You are my world.
Root of the root.
Root of the root.
Bud of the bud.
Bud of the bud.
Tree of the tree.
Tree of the tree.
Of a sky called life.
Of a sky called life.
It grows higher.
It grows higher.
And higher.
And higher.
Than soul can reach.
Than soul can reach.
Or mind can hope.
Or mind can hope.
And this is the wonder.
And this is the wonder.
That's keeping the stars apart.
That's keeping the stars apart.
I carry your heart.
I carry your heart.
In my heart.
In my heart.
Bump, bump.
Bump, bump.
Bump, bump.
Bump, bump.
Bump, ba-da-dum, bump.
Bump, bump.
Yeah, all right. Very good. So with the call-in shows, which we did early on, I think we've got just about, we're just about another minute from me. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just make sure we got everything. Yep.
Yeah, so this is, we did these call-in shows with mostly the Memory Cafés and the dementia specialists in Wisconsin, but we had them calling in from all over. And I'm just gonna do quickly again, let's see, let's not do that. How can I, Beth, help me out, help me learn how to do this. How can I see my screen while I'm looking at this slide? Can I do that so I can see my computer screen?
I would have to stop sharing and then you would share, but then everybody would see.
All right, forget it. We'll do it this way. What we did with the call-in shows is I've got a bunch of sound effects. And so we made it sound like an old radio show. And I've got cows and roosters and kids laughing and old phones and all kinds of stuff. So we use those throughout the shows to give it kind of an old radio feel. But of course, the biggest thing about old radio shows was the voices they used. And so my father, and maybe for you, your family or you, had a favorite radio show back in the day. My dad's was called The Shadow. And Beth, let's do it together. We'll end on this, a funny voice to make an old radio show. This is how The Shadow started back in the 1930s. So I'll say it, then Beth will say it. Here we go. Who knows what evil lurks in the heart of men?
Who knows what evil lurks in the heart of men?
The shadow knows.
The shadow knows.
Now that's how the show went, but this is how my dad would say it. He would say it like this. You ready, Beth?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. A little call and response with the shadow to give an old-fashioned radio voice. Here's how my dad would say it. Who knows what evil lurks in the heart of men?
I can't do that. Who knows what evil lurks in the heart of men?
Let's go up into your range. Here we go. Who knows what evil lurks in the heart of men?
That's not my range.
I know, that was too high. All right, here's the last little bit. Here it is. Here's what the answer is. Ready?
Yeah.
Who knows what evil lurks in the heart of men? The shadow do.
Ooh, the shadow do. So I think one thing that you can all tell is Gary is very improvisational, which is wonderful, whether your Memory Cafe is virtual or in person, because there's so much that you can't predict and you want to be open to the possibilities. So Gary, I think you're totally demonstrating this. And I just want to look at the last few slides here to make sure we didn't miss anything. I like your key technique about repeating and rephrasing the person's words, which is so woven into what you do with
You know what, Beth?
poetry.
I really like the way you key in on my point of your point of repeating the words back so that you know what I heard.
That was validation, which
Yeah,
is very
so-
important.
I was trying to validate you. I did kind of slip there. But anyway, that's the idea.
Yeah. And fees, so you were saying in general, they tend to be lower for virtual programs.
Yeah, especially, you know, there's no travel fee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you shared some stories with us, which is awesome. So we can see how alive these experiences are that you're sharing with people. And thank you for sharing your contact info. And my understanding is if there are any cafe people on the line who say, gee, I'd like to have one of the telephone poetry parties or something else, they can contact you and talk with you about working together. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. I would love to be a guest, but also if people just want to, you know, get help doing stuff, just like you were so generous with your help today, anyone can contact me with that. I'm happy to talk through stuff. Although after today, I think all the bases are covered. So thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much, Gary. I really appreciate it. And now I want to turn the floor over to Art. And I'm also just looking at the clock and realizing that I need to really be right on it to make sure everybody has time. So Art, can you unmute yourself?
I am unmuted and I will try to be brief and to the point.
You're doing great. Thank you.
I'm doing all the technical things. So you can advance. So
Okay.
there's what you're seeing is here is The Parkinson's group meeting in our dance room. This is also the same space where Beth has the Memory Cafés. And as you can see, we're all right next to each other. And we're not doing that anymore. So we're doing everything remotely now. And I am using Zoom. What I did is I purchased a Zoom account and not using the free one, because the free Zoom limits your time. And my classes run about an hour and a half. Even my hour classes tend to run over an hour. So I needed to pay for Zoom rather than just get the free version. And if you notice on here, I have something that says, in the process of recording Zoom sessions. If you are recording music and you are using songs that require a royalty, you are opening yourself up to a world of hurt. If you're going to record sessions that use music, you must use royalty-free music. So that's nothing you hear on the radio. But we do get cease and desist orders if we use people's songs like Bruno Mars or Aretha Franklin. Can't do that. You have to use royalty-free music. There is a lot of royalty-free music available out on the internet. Just type in royalty-free music into your Google and you'll get set to a lot of different places.
That's very helpful.
So that's only for the recording. In my room itself, when I'm teaching, I'm using regular pop music. The camera, if you notice, right now, the camera is showing just my bust. It's just the head and shoulders. Well, I'm doing movement work for people with balance issues, for people with memory issues. So I had to get a separate camera, and I'm just going to hold it up here. It's a Logitech camera. It has a pedestal that it can stand up on. It has a USB plug that plugs into the computer. And this way, this camera enables me to be filmed from head to foot in one picture, which of course, in what you're seeing here with the laptop camera is just not possible. And when working with movement, which is all of my classes are about movement, it's important that my students be able to see me from head to toe. The other thing is they're not in the same room as me, so they have to do the room checkout. Check the space around your chair. Make sure there's no electric cables, no computer cables, no throw rugs. And I do this at every class. Every class that I begin, I go through a hazards check to make sure that their dance space is safe. The other thing is being heard. I went out and purchased a separate microphone that also has a USB plug that plugs into the laptop. If you are using Bluetooth, it won't work, not with Zoom. And also in your Zoom settings down, I can't see it here or I can't show it here, but next to your microphone where there's that caret, one of the, whoops, I hit the wrong button. One of the options is audio settings. And in there, you can set your microphone levels and then click on the advance button and you're going to see this option for show in meeting option to enable original sound, which you want to have checked. Now, I do not use original sound for my classes, but if you're using live musicians, you want the original sound on so that sound can be picked up. I'm using just the computer sound, so when I'm doing that in the share screen mode, I go to the advanced setting and share just the computer audio. So the music that plays on my computer is able to be heard. And then my microphone volume is set loud so that I can speak over the music so that they can hear my instructions. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Working in the real world. I'm always checking to see if the students can hear me because there's always a conflict between the sound that's coming through the computer and my speaking voice. And I want to make sure that that balance is right so that they can hear the music to get the triggers for the sounds, for the movements, and they can hear my voice for the instructions. And I always take input from the students. I let them know it's their class, not mine. And let's go on to the next slide. Okay. For my classes, before every class, that one day before, I send an invitation. Now, in the invitation, it has the URL link to the class, the password, and my contact information. If you are using Zoom with recurring meetings, when you send that invitation out, it's always a good idea to go in and edit it to put in the correct date and time because that always changes. Have your phone ready and standing by before you start any class because someone, I guarantee you, someone is going to call you. They're having problems getting in. And it's going to be difficult to be working in email and getting them on. They're going to call you on the phone. So have your phone ready. You keep everybody muted in the classroom, but notice who they are. And if they call in and have a phone number there, I just go into the participant setting and change their name so that I know who their name is, so that I can call on them and mention it. So if I want to say to Beth, Beth knows I'm speaking to her. She hears her name, she perks up, I can unmute her and she can speak back. I usually try to keep one person unmuted and everybody else muted unless we're having a big group at the end. The other thing that I like to do is have a co-host. The groups that I'm doing are large and it's difficult for me to watch everybody. So the co-host can be watching everybody in gallery view, watching the chat, and paying attention to the waiting room because I do use security on mine. There's a password that people have to use to get in. And once they get in, they're in the waiting room. So there's a two-tiered process to get into my classes. And like Beth, I start the meetings about 15 minutes early. I go to the waiting room, I let people in, and we have a discussion before every class starts. As people join in, we have a discussion. Once the class starts, I have to keep them engaged. And the way I can do that is to make sure that they are familiar with all of the music that I am playing. I can't start with new music from my generation. I have to start with music from their generation, get them engaged, and once they're engaged, then I can move on to modern music. Okay, I'm just trying to rush through, Beth. I know you're rushed for time.
Yeah, it's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's all of my stuff is technical. For the fees for my classes are the same on Zoom as they are if we were meeting in person. My expenses have not decreased at all. The flip side of that is there are more people coming to my classes. So it depends on which classes they are, because with the Parkinson's group, I know that the decline has come down a little bit. But with my seniors balance classes, these are seniors who are 70, 80, 90 years old, and they have balance issues. We had a size limitation in the classroom of 12 students because that's how much space we had. We don't have that size limitation anymore because everyone's in their own home. I now have 40 students in there. I was limited to people who were in my general area, which is Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now I have people coming in from Russia. I have people coming in from the United Kingdom. I have people coming in from all over the United States. So the classroom has grown in size and in diversity. There are people coming in from all over the place. And we get back to the racial question we had earlier. In one of my classes, I misspoke and I misidentified an old song as a gospel tune. And one of the women in the classroom said, no, that's an inspirational gospel, an inspiration and not a gospel tune. And since then, she and I have been working together, and she has given me volumes and volumes on the history of African-American music in the United States from the 1600s through the present. And I have brought that into the class, and everyone has benefited from that. So let your students give you ideas and run with them. And I've noticed that as a teacher, I still have a lot to learn, and I'm willing to let my students teach me everything. As far as, are we going to keep Zoom? We are never going to get rid of Zoom. First of all, my population group is senior citizens, all mostly in nursing homes or assisted livings. They're not opening those up in Massachusetts yet. So Zoom is my only platform to do these things remotely. However, once we do get back together physically, I've already made a promise to them that we will never cancel another class because of a New England winter. We can dance right through any snowstorm. And we're still learning all kinds of things, the screen sharing, the breakout rooms, all the different things you can do on Zoom. And if you have any questions, there's 2 of my emails that you can reach me at. And I plan to keep going and teaching. Remember, if you're filming though, make sure you've got a camera that allows you to be filmed from head to foot so that your students can see every aspect of what you're doing. And other than that, make sure it's fun. Rule number 1 for my class when we were in person is we're here to have fun. Rule number 2 is we're going to do the work that's necessary. And rule number 3 is when rule number 2 gets too complicated, we're going back to rule number 1.
That's great. Thank you so much, Art. That is incredibly valuable, and I appreciate the technical detail.
Yeah, I just tried to rush through it.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Get any
Always the
questions,
way.
email me with questions.
Thank you, Art. So now I'd love to turn it over to Erica. Erica, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Take it away.
I also will try to speed through this, but I'm kind of a talker. So, so I am an art, what'd you say?
I said I'll be the heavy if I have to.
So I'm an art therapist, and I, prior to COVID, I have a private practice where I do art therapy in the homes of seniors living with and without dementia. And that's not possible right now. I also provide presentations on art therapy and groups in senior centers, assisted living, long-term care facilities. So a lot of those things are not possible right now. You know, now we have to move on to this virtual world, and it's been challenging, but it's also been really rewarding, and it brought me back to the core of what I'm doing and why I do it. So just coming back to that, my goal working with older adults living with dementia is to have them feel empowered and to also show their caregiver that they still have skills left that they can use, especially when it comes to creating art and all of just the art modalities, that the creative arts have this way of just bringing us to who we are, to our core. And that isn't lost when someone has dementia. So I am new to the virtual world. I use Zoom for groups and with individual clients. And then in terms of demonstration, sharing ideas, and to connecting to other artists, I've started using Instagram. And I have no recorded content because so much of what I do is interactive, and being an art facilitator, it's really being able to help someone when they have questions. I think that a lot of the recorded content when it comes to creating art visually is people often give up because they can't do the step that's required of them. And so giving people the opportunity to use simple supplies and being able to just get them involved with other people that are going on in the group is just really important, I think, when it comes to creating art. So like I said, COVID has really challenged the creative world, working with everyone, especially older adults. And my private practice declined drastically because I couldn't go to people's homes anymore, and I couldn't go to facilities like a lot of people. And so it definitely challenged me to figure out, you know, what can I do to help people out there, because people still need the help, even though we can't physically get it to them. And so I came up with this idea, and you can click the link when you get the slides, to create this caregiver companion art therapy kit. And so it has all the supplies needed for the caregiver and the person living with dementia to participate in an art therapy session with me in their home. And this can also work in a group setting. So if you're doing a memory cafe, you would purchase the kits from me, and then I would provide the service to your group. And I made a video, which if you click on that link, you'll be able to see it, just so you can get an idea of what a person would be doing. And I'm hoping to roll out more kits and more programs as the months go on. And I think what's great about this is it's going to show a person that a person still has those skills, and that they still can do art, even though they can't be there in person with a group. Let me see what else. Okay. And then if you are doing a group, I think when it comes to visual arts, consider programming that can provide the care partner with a skill that, like a creative skill that they can use after the program happens. So you're not just providing a space for someone with dementia to participate, you're also providing a space where you can empower a caregiver. And so I try to use simple supplies. This on the slide, the thing to the right is a planning supply list. And so I was very thorough about what supplies a person needs, offering images, because sometimes people don't get it when you just have words there. So offering the image of, this is what we're going to create, these are the sizes, these are the materials that you need. And then try to think about offering visual programs that also connect in nature. So you're saying to the care partner, you know, you have to go for a walk and you have to get a rock to participate in this program. Or looking at programs and seeing what supplies people have in their homes already, like tissue paper. We all have tissue paper in our house, so how can I incorporate that into a program? And then getting creative with things we have in our house, like how can you can use the back of a pencil, like a pencil eraser, for printmaking, and just trying to figure out, you know, how people can use what they have in their homes to be a part of a program. And then another idea that I had was sending a template out to participants so that they could print it out and then use that in the program. And I know not everyone's going to have a printer. So if you are offering a template, offering something that's very simple, so that maybe even the care partner could just draw it out on a piece of paper. And definitely check in with your moderator ahead of time, because there's always kinks that have to be worked out. I think that, you know, the more open you are with the moderator, the easier it will go. You can go to the next one. And then these are just suggestive steps, but first, obviously, introduce yourself and allow the participants to introduce each other if it's appropriate in that setting. And asking them, say your name and ask a funny question that everybody has to answer, or ask everybody to move a little bit, just to get people reconnected. Because what we're really doing is we're doing a program, but we're also reconnecting people with other people. For some of these participants, this is the only time that they're getting out. This is the only time that they're connecting and having conversations with other people. So really being aware that we're connecting people. Go through your supply list that you have and make sure that everybody's ready to participate in terms of a visual program. And if, somebody's always going to have to run and get something, so have conversation starters just kind of in your back pocket so that you can keep everybody else connected while that person goes to grab what they need. And for me, I prefer to leave everyone unmuted. And because, again, that conversation, there's no music involved, so it's not kind of jumping in that sense. So with the visual arts, it's the conversation that happens over the creation of art that's really important.
Sorry, Erica, that I went back and forth on your slides by accident.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So designing a program that's failure-free is always the goal. You want to make it less about the art and more about the creative conversation that's going on around the art making. And again, someone who's in later stage dementia is going to need that one-on-one help when creating art, most likely. And so maybe depending on your Memory Cafe and knowing who the participants are as the moderator, just letting the visual artists know that, we have lots of people in later stage, or we have lots of people at earlier, wherever the people are, just taking that into account and how they're going to be able to engage. I suggest just listing a magazine as a supply on the supply list, even though it might not pertain to the program, just so somebody has that out already in case they can't physically participate or become engaged with the program. And so my individual therapeutic fees are the same. Group fees are less without the supplies. So because I bring lots and lots of supplies, my fees are a lot higher because you get everything when I come to a facility. So I've taken off the supply fee. But if people are interested in an idea like the caregiver companion art kit, then that's obviously going to increase the price. And then just one other thing with that caregiver kit. So if you were to do it in a group form, it might be good if it's a senior center or anywhere that the Memory Cafe is hosted, if there's a pickup location so people could pick up supplies if shipping is not possible. The hardest part for me is that physical interaction, just using different techniques to engage people at all different levels of the disease process, and to be able to physically assist someone if they need that assistance, but still giving them the power to feel like I'm the one who made that mark and it wasn't me that made it, it was them that made it. And then going back to my goal that working with older adults, like I want to give them all the control. And so when they participate in an art therapy program with me, they're getting all the control. And that's really hard when it's over Zoom, because there's also the caregiver there who might want to do their program for them, whatever the piece that they're working on, and they may actually need that help for somebody to do it. And a lot of times caregivers will take over. And so in person, I try to prevent that from happening. So I can't when it's over the internet. Unexpected gifts is just how people reconnect over Zoom, and the conversations and the laughter, the group laughter. Like, when's the last time you heard a group of people laughing since COVID? That's always in the back of my head whenever I hear a group laughing. Let's see what else. You can read that. Learning new and creative ways to engage people, and just every single time I do a program, I'm learning something new. And so today I did a program this morning, and I got on Zoom from 2 different accounts so that people could see me. But then the other thing is I had my phone showing a demonstration of what I was doing. So people could see and hear me, but they could also see what I was doing, which is kind of cool because that's not something that I would offer in person. So they got to see this dual relationship to me. So, and then you can contact me and follow me on Instagram and go to my website. And so next, I hope that was fast, sorry.
No, it's great. Thank you so much, Erica. It's
You're welcome.
incredibly rich. Thank you. So Ishmael and Deborah are going to present together. They're both in New York City and they work together a lot, and they're both musicians and song leaders. So if the two of you want to unmute, so we have 15 minutes, and after the two of you, we have another duo, which is Monique and Stephen.
Okay.
So if you can maybe aim for 7 minutes.
It's not a problem. Having been a professional musician all my life and working at weddings and parties, I've learned when the maitre d' in a restaurant or a catering hall tells you, make it quick, you make it quick. Otherwise, you don't need it. So we'll keep it short. Don't worry
You're
about
awesome.
that.
You know, we were ahead of schedule earlier in the program, and it just, you know what, there's just a lot to say. Take it away.
For myself, I'll let Deborah say a few words at this. For my own, like I say, I've been playing for all my life, and I was playing in nursing homes and hospitals for the past 30 years. And then I got involved with the New York Memory Center, and I met Gary and all these wonderful people there. And now with the COVID thing going on, and I was like, well, how are we going to get music to these people? And then Gary told me all about the Zoom idea, which Deborah helped me because I'm not a very non-technological person. So she helped me start that thing up and get that going. And it's been interesting. It's been rather interesting. I play music basically to entertain people, make people have a good time, but I also keep in mind their condition and what they need. And what I usually do is I'll play a song, and then I'll ask them the name of the song. They'll sing along with it. They might dance along with it. And then ask them if they remember when the song came out. It might be an old song. And I've had people say, you know, songs that come out in the 30s, they can remember when they were kids, you know, what was going on at the time. So I think that's good to help the memory like that. But basically, that's what I do. What I found out with the Zoom, this whole Zoom thing I'm very new to this. I like one-on-one. I have like a group of people. I entertain them. I play, and I like with Deborah sometimes, and we do that. The thing is that going here on Zoom, we have less people. So I have maybe 6 to 8 people that are actually in the session rather than 20. And I like to keep my mute on. I leave it on. Even though I'm hearing noise in the background, I hear people singing along, and it's very uneven because somebody comes louder than the other, this and that. I just like kind of cut that out. I know that they're doing it, and I just entertain because I do want the interaction, and I like the interaction. I'm still experimenting with that, but I do like the group effort with that. So that's basically what I find with that. I do some storytelling sometimes too. As I play a saz, I use that here and there for other sessions, but basically my main instrument is the accordion, and I entertain. I just try to be open to people, to cultures. You mentioned that earlier. I'm always open to cultures and people, and see what they like, and I try to learn from that as well. So it's I'm new to this. Zoom is new. It's a new thing to me, and I hope to get more into it in the future as I learn. So there it is. Deborah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I have a very similar experience. We work in the same memory facility, the Memory Center in Brooklyn, where Gary works. And I got to really know this population so well. And one of the things also speaking to what you mentioned in the beginning, I like to play as many different languages and songs. I just go all over the place with the music I sing. And started to one of the people who was just sort of helping out there said, do you know any calypso? Because there's a Jamaican population. So I, you know, and I looked up Little Mighty Sparrow, and it didn't seem anything appropriate for me to do. And then so I just brought in these Harry Belafonte songs, and I just thought, oh, I'm this white girl singing, Daddy, oh, Daddy, you know, like that. And yet it was like they loved it. And so I thought, oh, this is going to be like, you're going to be rolling your eyes. And instead it was like the thing of connecting. It was the connection was much more important. So anyway, bringing it into the Zoom, now I know the songs. I have a book of the songs that connect to the population, and it's pretty much a similar setup. I move my room around and turn it into like a set. I just recently got a better microphone and sort of a boom type thing, and to sort of improve on the sound. But right now, it really isn't so important. What's important is the connection, and we do have a small enough group. I keep the like Ismail. I thought at first I was going to mute everybody so the sound would be better, much better. That way everybody's hearing each other, and the loudest person gets heard the most, and I'm the loudest person. So it really sort of takes care of itself that way. What else to share? Well, I have a personal aspect to this, which Gary mentioned. My mother, she just before COVID, we had taken her to a neurologist, and it turned out she's on a spectrum, border on the fence, really. So right before we were all locked down, I had to train her in using Zoom. And most of the people that are on our Zooms have a caregiver doing it for them. Very few people are doing it for themselves. But I had like trained her like day in, day out for a couple weeks, getting on every day, and it kind of got into her thing. So I think going forward, it'd be like I would love to see, those tech kids, those people from Brandeis that you were mentioning, that getting explored more, how to get people more independently connecting or understanding. And I think it's possible. I've seen it happen with my mother. So really that's, and now she can come on our memory center thing. She doesn't live in Brooklyn, but she gets to be on it, and that's wonderful.
That's great. I'm just going to make a comment, which is that there's a website, Senior Planet, which has really good video tutorials geared toward older adults who are learning different platforms. Senior Planet, you can Google that.
I saw somebody mentioned that, and I was going to save the chat and get all of that. That's terrific. Thank you.
Cool. Bravo. There it is.
Let's see if there's anything else. So you both mentioned calling on people one-on-one, trying to have those little one-on-one moments as well as a group. And fees, it sounded like it's in the same ballpark as before. And I think it's very important for Memory Cafe coordinators like me to be conscious of the expense, the time that goes into facilitating virtually. It's a whole new set of challenges, and there isn't the travel or bringing the equipment, but there's other challenges. So just important to have that conversation with teaching artists and appreciate what it is they have in terms of overhead. Anything else that either of you want to mention quickly before we turn it over to our last duo?
I think a lot has been said here. I remember Art before was talking about the use of a microphone to improve it. I mean, it's a learning process because this is something totally new.
And the audio settings, we figured out there's this very specific way to set your audio on special settings that maximizes, and you can get higher range and stuff like that, which we could go through. If anybody wants to ask me, I can go on Zoom and take them to the specific settings.
That's very generous of you to offer, and all the artists today have shared their contact information, so thank you so much.
This is one of the guys I share from my home when they say
Great. And one of the things you mentioned, Deborah, is that a nice aspect of Zoom is that people actually see your home setting, and that you have, you can share with them some signs or items in your home, which makes it personal in a different way.
He just reminded me, like, somebody asked for how much is that doggy in the window, so we get them to all bark, and we got a lag on Zoom, so it is cacophonous with it. And then it was my mother pulls out this like red dog that she had, and then Ismail comes up with his. So it's like, we all have our toys that we're sharing. We're like, whatever. But
Here's your contact information. I know that Stephen and Monique are all about using the resources they have at home. So it's a perfect segue. So thank you, Ismail and Deborah, very much for sharing.
Thank you.
And I want to turn it over to our last pair. And this is actually from a session that they led at the JF&CS Memory Cafe years ago when we were in person. So Monique, Stephen, if you want to unmute.
Yep. Hi, Beth. Hello, everybody.
And
And
we have
thank you all for having us here today.
just a little process moment because it's 3:25. So what I'm going to suggest is you go ahead through your slides, and anyone who wants to ask a question live, if you want to just hang on for 5 minutes at the end, you know, maybe we could just tag 5 minutes extra to do that for whoever can stay. If you have to leave, that's fine. So go right ahead.
Thanks, Beth. So drum circles on Zoom are very different from drum circles in person. And as you might imagine, there's a lot of energy that gets expressed in a live drum circle. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges we found in terms of translating what we do to a virtual setting. You can advance the slide, Beth. We do primarily use Zoom for our live programs, and this is a new, I have not really spent a lot of time, it's KikoChat, but it's another platform that could be something if you're techie and you want to look into that, feel free. I have not looked into that yet, but Zoom has been working so far for us in terms of doing our programs live. You can advance that, Beth. So this was, what we've been doing is recording programs, and they've been posted on the Alzheimer's Foundation of America's Facebook page. So this was a piece we did on found sound, which is anything you can find around your house and make noise with, done in our dining room. And what we've also been doing is sending these videos to all of the activities directors that we work with in the assisted living facilities and nursing homes that have been our clients over the last 8 years. You can advance that. And this is one of the things we found is that in terms of creating a consistent theme, this is how we start every single one of our drum circles, whether they're virtual or recorded. We have a set setting, we have a set background, and it creates some consistency in what we're producing. Go ahead.
And one thing about our recorded sessions is that we use a phone. We use a phone as opposed to the laptop, because the phone takes a bigger picture, takes a bigger video, better sound, and better picture quality.
So I think, yes, and enabling original sound on Zoom is very, very important for anybody doing music. And it's also important for the participants. So it could be helpful, it would be very helpful if participants could enable original sound, which Art explained how to do.
The reason being is that the original sound allows the sound to sustain itself. So a note of music or a drum beat will sustain rather than be cut off by the noise cancellation of the Zoom process.
So, and I think everything else here is pretty standard. We have a photograph of the phone and a photograph. All right, so on the left-hand side is what a typical drum circle looks like set up without people. It's much more fun when there were people in those chairs. And then on the right-hand side, the top picture is me relating to the phone. And the bottom picture is me relating to the computer. So the top is the recorded, the bottom is a Zoom setting. Okay. So we've found we're lucky there's two of us, because one of us is sitting much closer to the computer in terms of being able to engage with people, to mute and unmute. And it brings, I find it brings the presence a little bit closer in, so there's a little bit more intimacy. And it's also sometimes difficult to hear what our participants are saying. So when we're closer to it, and when we take a pause from drumming, we can actually hear what they're saying. So the drum circles are all about encouraging unique self-expression. It's a no-fail zone. It's a no-mistake zone. And so we continue to encourage that. I find we're exaggerating our physical movements. So in order for people to see us and see what we're doing, it was helpful to hear that if you can't see the guitar, then it can be disorienting. So that was really helpful to hear that. slowing down, repeating instructions is important. It's important in person, and it's even more important in a virtual setting. And then we'll play shorter sequences so that we can connect in with the folks that we're working with on a more frequent basis during the session. So this is what I'm finding is really important, because when you're on Zoom, it can be like you're relating to a screen, but my intention is to really relate to the people who are there, whether we know them or not. So that's one of the things that I'm very intentional about. And then we don't have the energy of the room and the drumming and the sound and the rhythms to kind of boost our spirits. We have the two of us. But the two of us don't always count when it comes to being in a room with 25 or 30 people. So we really have to work hard to get our energy up and be animated and engage in a way that is enlivening. And then working through being camera shy. If you're a facilitator or if you're a Memory Cafe host, this is a different kind of environment. So learning how to get comfortable in front of the camera is important. And then drumming can be a new activity. Music is a tried and true, as well as poetry, as well as reading, as well as art, but not everybody's had a drumming experience in their lives. So being able to introduce how the importance of this has been important for our work. So bring your whole beautiful selves to this, because our participants are bringing their whole beautiful selves. Set an intention. What do we want? Who do we want to be for our participants, and what do we want them to leave with? And we teach to that. Be willing to fail. This is not a perfect transition into a virtual mode. Be patient with the technology. It's progress, not perfection, and then value your offering. So we don't have to lug 20 plus drums in and out of the house, in and out of the car, in and out of the facility, back into the car, and then back into the house. So that's a huge plus in some sense, but it does cost us more in terms of the emotional energy it takes to facilitate virtually. And we found it's difficult to monetize, especially a drumming kind of thing, in the midst of so many free offerings. So we're still trying to work that out. And we're thrilled that the Alzheimer's Foundation has links. It's called Music with Monique and Stephen. We have 2 videos up there. They're about 15 or 20 minutes. One is about beating out your stress, and the other one is magical music and magical meditative music. And then we have a found sound video as well that we put out there. So we feel it's important to be able to expose and make available what we have to offer. And please expect to pay people who are doing this. This is our livelihood, and it's been really wiped out in a lot of ways. It would be helpful to have across the board rate for people who are running memory cafes for virtual programs. I'm happy to hear that folks are getting the same amount that they were before. And then I don't think we're going to be seeing any of our seniors in real time anytime soon, which is really sad. So yeah, we miss the dynamism, we miss the smiles, we miss seeing people light up, wake up, play their drums, come up with rhythms spontaneously, and yeah, that's been really difficult, and the technology. So I think that's good. We've had over 800 views on one Alzheimer's Foundation video and almost 700 on the other so far, and it's just been a few weeks.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry that we had to rush through that a little bit. You have so much that's really valuable to share. So these slides went out to everyone. I want to remind you our next quarterly meeting will be September. I'm going to stop sharing my slides so that we can see each other. We still have quite a large group with us. And we're now at almost a few minutes after 3:30. So feel free to leave if you have to. If you're still here, if you have a question for any of our panelists, feel free to just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. And I'm going to actually pause our